Okay, I've been reading more lately, and buying tons of books and stuff like that. So I figured I'd discuss a few of the books. I'll start off with something light, nothing heavy. Um, yeah, and also, folks, sorry if my energy level isn't quite as high as it usually is. It's got to be something like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning right now. But get some of these book reviews out of the way. I bought a couple of these John Lennon books. Um, got his first book came out I think in '64, '65 possibly. Spaniard in the works and in his own right. And I got one that I think was published like in the '80s, Skywriting by word of mouth. Uh, the only people I think who would be interested in these books at all would be people who are like really hardcore fans. I would think. Uh, and I read this one here back in high school, probably not long after it came out. Now, this first book actually, it's got a certain charm because there is actually recognizable humor in it and stuff. Uh, some of the stories are kind of cute. What I find particularly interesting is though, even though he's like Mister Peace and Love, and you know, uh, Pied Piper, one of the original Pied Pipers for the New World Order. There's still a lot of like overt like racism in here, which is kind of entertaining. He has says stuff about but blacks and Jews. It's kind of funny. Maybe I'll just come back with some examples later on. Now, the second book, I'm probably like one of a small handful of people in the world who actually, suffered through reading this thing cover to cover, uh, because it's like written in the same kind of like garbly, kind of like nonsensical style. But there's like very little traditional humor in it at all. So it's a real chore reading it actually. Now the first part of the book actually has sort of it's an autobiographical thing in here about him getting together with Yoko Ono, which is readable because it's more like a sequential story. But when you get into it, it's like it's got some of his scribbly drawings. Some of them are kind of cute, but a lot of them are just like, why bother wasting ink to
Can we
publish these things?
can we see?
Well, there's like this one girl's like, I'm one of your largest fans, ha ha ha. Uh, but
Really? You made fun of fat chicks. Wow.
yeah, he also makes fun of Negroes and Jews. But
And then it shows a little animal going to the bathroom.
a little poodle, I guess.
Poodle poo.
So yeah, so I'm
What
gonna
is that?
so I'll just like randomly like pick a selection here just to give you some idea, and it doesn't really matter like which one I pick. It's all pretty much the same nonsense here. I'll just like pick something at total random. I have no idea what it's going to be. Just to give you some idea, like how this thing is written. Perry had cycled to Bloomingdale's in a fit of pique. She settled down in her exercise chair and began to pee. It seems that Perry had discovered her secret life as a pornographic priestess in certain movies, and although he was suffering from an incurable disease, it had made him mad. He dried himself carefully before filling me in on the details. He's a beast, she said, replacing her tampon. He behaved in the most humiliating way. And that's actually one of the more intelligible paragraphs from this thing. I actually forced myself to read the whole thing, hoping to like get something out of it, but it was basically a waste of time. Here's one of the probably best picture in the book. It's just obviously some doodle he did while he was probably bored talking on the phone or something like that.
You heard he was a heroin addict?
Yeah, he went through that phase. Yeah, and so and like I said, you might be very interested or even possibly delighted, depending on your point of view, that he actually does get some jibes in at Jews and Negroes. He talks about like some Negro activist who was like wearing a very expensive, height of fashion, uh, uh, like army outfit or something like that, and he refers to a couple of Jewish activists as Marx and Jesus and stuff. So there's some of that in there, and this first one, which is actually kind of cute. Um, Here, just this is just I don't feel like going through the whole book to find the best examples, but here's a story where he kind of he's kind of making fun of black people. He says it's called Partly Dave. There once upon a time was a man who was partly Dave. He had a mission in life. I'm partly Dave, he would groan in the morning, which was half the battle. Over breakfast, he would again say, I'm partly Dave, which always unnerved Betty. You're in a rut, Dave, a voice would say on his way to work, which turned out to be a colored conductor. It's all right for you, Dave used to think, little realizing the colored problem. Partly Dave was a raving salesman with the gift of gob, which always unnerved Mary. I seem to have forgotten my bus fare, cobber, said Dave, not realizing it. Get off the bus, then, said Buzzaboo, in a voice that bode not boot, not realizing the colored problem himself, really. Okay, said partly Dave, humbly not wishing to offend. But would you like your daughter to marry one? A voice seemed to say as Dave left off the bus like a burning spastic. So anyway, yeah, okay, the first book, like I said, it's kind of cute. Has a certain kind of like, youthful energy in it, But the second book, it's as much of a task it was for me to read this thing. I can't imagine, like, what kind of a narcissistic, drugged out, like, person would actually spend all this time writing this rubbish. I mean, it's unbelievable. But like I said, on the positive point, I don't want to affect their sales because Yoko would probably sue me or something if I gave her a bad review. The first book is actually, it's been dubbed the Ballad of John and Yoko, so I can kind of get his angle on that whole thing about the breakup of the Beatles and his leaving his wife for Yoko and all that kind of stuff. So that's my review of these two John Lennon books. Oh, there is another John Lennon book out there which I'm actually kind of curious to read. It's called John Lennon and the Jews. I don't know what that's about, but it might be interesting. If I read it, I'll do a review of it. Okay, guys, see you next video.